Now welcome to another lightning response video, where this time we got a question from Smintilli, who asked, "Hey Thor, since you talk a lot about what you think Lucas means by balance in the Force, and how he said everyone in that galaxy has a destiny, do you think, keeping in mind that balance doesn't mean equal parts light and dark, that some people are destined to become Sith? Or is it that they choose to be selfish? How do we know Anakin isn't destined to become Vader? And to add to that, how do we know if it's Anakin's destiny to become Vader because that's the only way to stop the Emperor by the point he kills Windu? In other words, is Star Wars' destiny perhaps conditional, as in to stop the Emperor after a certain point it has to be from within, if you will? Also, maybe Palpatine was destined to become Sidious to realign the dogmatic Jedi Order and reattune the Jedi to the will of the Force. Would love to hear your own takes on this. To me, it's quite the conundrum due to having so many layers. Alright, so as I so often like to do, we're going to go to a George Lucas quote and start there. This one taken from the book, The Mythology of Star Wars, and in it he said, "Everybody has the choice of being a hero or not being a hero every day of their lives. You can either help somebody, you can be compassionate towards people, you can treat some people with dignity, or not. And one way you become a hero, and the other way you're part of the problem. It's not a grand thing. You don't have to get into a giant laser sword fight and blow up 3 spaceships to become a hero. It's a very small thing that happens every day of your life." Basically, as I always say, Star Wars is about choices, about how the ones we make can and will impact not only ourselves, but those around us as well. Sometimes in small ways, sometimes in pretty big ways, and sometimes in ways that, in Star Wars at least, can affect the entire galaxy. And thus, even though as far as I know Lucas has never expressly said this, but I don't think anyone is ever destined to be evil or to become a Sith. I think such a thing, that you're meant to be evil, would go against the very idea or message behind Star Wars, or against what Lucas was saying in that quote I just read about choices and how you can become a hero in your own life. And yes, that would include Anakin too. I don't think he is ever meant to become Darth Vader and to fulfill the prophecy that way, by first destroying the Jedi or helping destroy them. None of that was Anakin's destiny, and in a manner of speaking, or on a technicality, he wasn't the one who did all of that anyway. It was actually Darth Vader that destroys the Jedi. Anakin's destiny was instead to destroy the Sith and bring balance to the Force, which he ultimately does when he, in Return of the Jedi, returns to the light and becomes Anakin once more, and in the process he destroys the part of himself that was Darth Vader, and then destroys Darth Sidious. This is all even confirmed by George Lucas, that yes, Anakin is the chosen one and fulfills the prophecy right here. However, even though I just said that it was never Anakin's destiny to become Vader, you could argue it becomes Anakin's fate to fall to the dark side and become Darth Vader after Maul kills Qui-Gon Jinn. And the name of that fight, Duel of the Fates, very much implies the fate of Anakin is indeed on the line there. And you might be asking, well, what the heck is the difference? Isn't destiny and fate pretty much the same thing? And, well, not exactly. They're very similar, yes. But fate implies a future that is virtually unavoidable, that it will come about no matter what you try to potentially do to stop it if you're even aware of your fate. While destiny is something you yourself usually pursue or have to manifest. It is usually a positive thing that you strive towards and eventually find. It usually requires you doing something to find it as well. And probably the best way to think of it, or to think of the two, is that you can find your destiny, but you cannot escape your fate. And this might make you ask, well, if it becomes Anakin's fate to fall and become Darth Vader, then it's not really about choices anymore, is it? He didn't make the choice to save Palpatine and to betray Windu by chopping off his hand. That was now his fate. It was unavoidable, something he couldn't stop himself from doing. And this is where I think things get a little tricky. Because I still fully believe that Anakin absolutely had a choice there and then, and I actually think it becomes his fate to have to make that decision after Duel of the Fates, after Maul defeats and kills Qui-Gon. Because if that doesn't happen, if Qui-Gon lives, I think it's very likely That some way, somehow, he ends up being the one to train Anakin and becomes a sort of father figure to Anakin, which is something Obi-Wan never was or could be to him. Obi-Wan ended up being something more like a big brother instead. And so if Qui-Gon lives and fills the father figure role for Anakin, well then there's no need for him to ever turn to Palpatine for that, which we clearly see Anakin do in the films. It's then extremely unlikely that Palpatine and Anakin ever become friends or anything of the sort. So right away that takes or would have taken a huge factor or variable out of that equation, that fateful decision to save Palpatine, should it still even arise in this alternate universe or timeline where Qui-Gon now lives, which it likely never even does. Either way, or even if it does somehow happen, Anakin has no real reason to save Palpatine beyond him being the Supreme Chancellor, of course. Because, for one, he is not a dear friend anymore. He is not that father figure, one that has convinced him that the Jedi Order is plotting against the both of them, really. In other words, he's likely going to trust Windu over Palpatine in that situation now. And for two, Palpatine hasn't promised Anakin that he can save his wife, which is the main reason Anakin makes the choice in the first place. It's all about saving Padme. Nothing else mattered to him. And that's even assuming Padme and Anakin still become a thing, again in this alternate timeline where Qui-Gon lives, which maybe they don't. Maybe Anakin is trained completely differently under Qui-Gon and becomes the perfect Jedi, and thus it's very, very unlikely that he ever marries Padme. In other words here, many of the things, basically all the things that led Anakin to having to make that choice that led to him becoming Darth Vader are likely never going to happen or play out that way if Qui-Gon Jinn lives. Him having to make that choice never becomes his fate. And thus he never becomes Darth Vader, because again, that was never his destiny. Keeping in mind that destiny is usually something, again, that you have to find and that is generally positive for you. All meaning that there was likely some other way Anakin was destined to destroy the Sith after being properly trained to be a Jedi, again, most likely by Qui-Gon Jinn, or so I would guess. It could be something different, I don't know. That is all in the head of George Lucas somewhere. But it was a Sith or Maul that screwed the whole thing up, because that is what the Sith do. That is why they are a problem in the first place, because they cause imbalance by existing, by being this wrecking ball that goes out into the galaxy and does pretty much whatever they want to do. They don't care about what their destiny may or may not have been. They are going to blaze their own path in the galaxy, and they only care about what they want, taking as much as they can, taking everything they can, really, and being the very epitome of selfishness. And living that way is, again, it's like a wrecking ball that just derails, if not robs others of their destinies, of their free will potentially, and even can set their fate. For example, when a Sith takes over the whole galaxy like Palpatine did, he now enforces his will over others. Their destinies are now being hampered by his will. He is, for many of them, setting their fate. Or if a Sith simply decides to, on a whim perhaps, kill somebody, it doesn't matter what their destiny may have been. It no longer matters that they may have been destined to go on to do great things and to help many people. Their fate was to die at the hands of a Sith who does whatever they want, or only ever thinks of themselves, and there was nothing they could have ever done to change that or avoid it. And that, in a way, is what happened to Qui-Gon Jinn. It was not his destiny to die to Darth Maul, but it became his fate, which then, again, sort of sets up Anakin's fate to have to make that choice many years down the road. The one that leads to him becoming Darth Vader and destroying the Jedi, before ultimately becoming Anakin once more and destroying the Sith. And no, that destroying the Jedi Order part didn't have to happen. Yes, the Jedi were a bit flawed and dogmatic, perhaps, at the time, but I don't think anyone would or could argue that they were doing anything that justified their destruction. Well, maybe Leslie Headland would try, but you have to keep in mind that the Jedi we see in the prequels are pretty much how they're supposed to be. Their greatest flaw or issue at the time is they're a little bit cocky and seem less about following the will of the Force and more about following the will of the Senate. but they are still doing a ton of good in the galaxy. They are still the most moral beings in the galaxy, as George Lucas has even said. Also, keep in mind that the dark side is indeed rising at this time. It is growing in power and even hampering the Jedi's ability to use the Force. So many people seem to want to blame everything on the Jedi, everything that goes wrong, and they fail to realize, or perhaps I should say give credit to, the Sith and Palpatine in particular. He very much defeats the Jedi. It is not all on them. And also, don't forget, it has been a millennium since the Jedi had really seen any sign of the Sith or this type of power from the dark side. They were unprepared, they were a bit sure of themselves, and a brilliant Sith took advantage of all of that and defeated them. Furthermore, there's a very good chance that after Anakin does indeed destroy the Sith and balances the Force, that this may have been a bit of a wake-up call for the rest of the Jedi. This may have shown them that, hey, maybe we've grown a bit too sure of ourselves, and we should focus a bit more on following the will of the Force. Maybe looking to the Jedi Code for answers all the time isn't what we should be doing. Maybe we should be trusting our instincts a bit more. And so, to sum it up, no one's ever destined to be evil, not in Star Wars anyway. It is their own choices that lead them there, which is the real lesson of Star Wars, that we are aware of the choices we make and how they can affect the people around us as well, or how they can affect our own lives. And yes, sometimes the bad choices we make are spurred along by other people who have made bad choices or want to see us fail and fall, which is why balance is so important, why it is important to have good people around you or in the world in general. Nevertheless, yeah, sometimes the bad choices we make, sometimes the bad choices of those around us, set us up for a tragic fate, such as Anakin's fate to have to make an impossible choice that led him to becoming Darth Vader. Well, that's all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about all this. Give me your take on fate and destiny in Star Wars. Or tell me if you think Anakin was meant to become Darth Vader. You can also feel free to ask a question for a future lightning response video. All you gotta do is start your comment off with "Hey Thor" and then ask away. But whatever you choose to do, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.